Welcome to History Students watching. As we begin our new chapter, we're going to start chapter 43 on page 422 today in our lesson. We've been traveling and learning more about things that have happened in our country. And as we've learned about our past, we've learned about several heroes, people who have helped make our country what it is today. Tell me the person who came over and he was one of the explorers who helped discover the New World. Carly. Not the discoverer of the New World. Jackson. Christopher Columbus was the person who discovered America or the New World in 1492. We had several people who helped with the founding of America, and as those founded America, several of the Native Americans helped those settlers. Tell me one of those people who helped with the settlers in Jamestown, in Plymouth, Presley. Squanto was one of those Native Americans who helped the settlers at Plymouth. Then we had some people who helped establish our country. Tell me the name of our first president, Deb.
George Washington.
Yes, so you see him here on our timeline. Then we had several great Americans that came after the time of George Washington. Tell me the name of the president who was president during the Civil War, Asa. He was shot and killed by John Wilkes Booth. Abraham Lincoln is correct. Tell me the name of the lady who helped slaves find their way to freedom using the Underground Railroad. Remain seated, Adriana. Harriet Tubman is right. Then we had several other people who helped with the exploring and the expansion of our country. During the time of the Civil War, and around that time, there was a lady who was a nurse who helped those wounded soldiers. Who was that? Remain seated, Presley.
Clara Barton.
Right. And then we had some people who helped with the exploration of America. Tell me one of the people who helped explore America as America doubled in size through the Louisiana Purchase. Anna?
Sacagawea.
Yes, she was one who was the Native American Indian guide for Lewis and Clark. That time came just after George Washington and before the presidency of Abraham Lincoln. Then from the time of the Civil War, we talked about some Americans who wanted to share the gospel with others. Tell me the name of the missionary couple who took the gospel to the Auca Indians. Anna.
Mr. and Mrs. Fair.
Help her out. Madison. Jackson, remain seated.
Jim and Elizabeth Elliot.
Yes, Jim and Elizabeth Elliot. Well done. Jim ended up giving his life to help those Indians trust Jesus as Savior. We talked about some people who helped the Southerners in their way of farming. One of them was a man who helped and who taught at a school. What was his name, Dev?
Booker T. Washington.
Yes, it was Booker T. Washington. Now, during this time period, just after that is where our next heroes come from. So we haven't quite journeyed all the way through the timeline yet, but we're starting just after that time period in the 1900s, early 1900s. So now take a look at page 422, and you see the two people we're going to learn more about. Our next heroes are John Glenn and Neil Armstrong. As you look at their timeline there at the bottom, you can see that they lived during World War II and America's 200th birthday. What year was that in, students watching? And Lexi. Did you find it on the timeline? Carly.
1976.
1976 was the year that America's 200th birthday took place in. So this is where our story picks up with John Glenn and Neil Armstrong. From 1921 to 2016 were the years that John Glenn was alive, and then for Neil Armstrong, 1930 to 2012. So going through the 1900s. Now let's find out how they became part of America's heroes. Read our first phrase for us, Madison.
Pearl Harbor Harbor?
Yes, this is a location that became very famous in Hawaii during World War II, during the time that one of the countries that was at war with several other countries, the country of Japan, ended up bombing and attacking Pearl Harbor. Through that attack, America responded and ended up joining that war and participating in World War II. So we'll talk more about those events. Read our next phrase for us, Anna.
World War II.
Yes, and this was a time when many countries were at war with each other. America ended up joining that war and fighting to help several countries gain and for America to maintain her freedom. Read our next phrase for us, Asa.
Combat mission.
Yes, now these would be missions that would be involving many groups of people to help protect and defend our country. Read the next phrase for us, Presley.
Test pilot.
Yes, and now this would take place during this time when there would be pilots that would train and they would need to get familiar with the aircraft and how to use them. So this would be part of the training that was involved there. Read our next two words for us, cadence.
Astronauts orbit.
Yes, an astronaut is someone who travels into outer space. And an orbit is going around through the gravitational pull, the Earth, so circling around the Earth. The moon does that around the Earth because of the Earth's gravitational pull. And our next phrase for us, Emily.
Friendship Center.
Yes, now this was a type of device that was used to carry people into outer space. It was one of those that carried several into outer space. Now, picking up with John Glenn and Neil Armstrong's story, we're going to find out that these men love to fly. How many of you enjoy traveling on an airplane? I see some travelers here and some students watching as well. That can be very fun for some. Some people are a little bit nervous, but for these men, they loved flying, and they're able to use their flying skills in many different areas. So let's read more about their stories. Begin reading for us, Una, on the top of page 423.
Two small boys, many miles apart, discovered their love of flying when their fathers took them for their first airplane rides. John Glenn was 8 years old, and Neil Armstrong was only 5 years old when it all began. These boys had no idea that they would grow up to become pilots as well as pioneers of space.
Good accuracy. Continue, Jimmy.
John Glenn,
Three.
Red, white.
Okay, start his name again. It's a short E. John what?
John Glenn.
Yes.
Growing up.
Yes.
Red, white, and blue flags lined in the streets, storefronts of a small town in Ohio. As the marching bands played in the parade, John Glenn Jr.'s heart swelled with pride. He loved the flag. He loved his country and wondered what he could do to serve the United States. He could not have imagined what the world would soon watch as he soared into space, not once, but twice.
Good expression, Carson.
As a young child, John loved building model airplanes, as he found jobs washing cars and sold vegetables to earn extra money so that he could buy his own bicycle. He delivered newspapers in his neighborhood.
Well done. Pause. Students watching, tell me something that John loved doing as a boy. Dev?
Building airplanes.
Exactly correct. How many of you enjoy building things? See several builders here and some students watching as well. Hands down. Let's continue looking at important words and names. Jackson, read those for us.
Astronaut, a person who is trained to travel and work in space. John Glenn, first American to orbit the Earth, U.S. Center, oldest man in space. Neil Armstrong, the first astronaut to step on the moon. Alan Shepard, the first American in space.
Now pause. So John Glenn was that U.S. Senator also, and he was the oldest man to go into outer space. But let's read more about how his journey takes him on those great things that he's able to accomplish. What is he able to do that lead up to these important events? Continue reading for us, Jacob.
John had big dreams that include flying. While John was in college, he learned about a program that will allow him to take flying lessons for free. He quickly enrolled in this class and learned to fly. On December 7, 1941, as John listened to the radio, he heard about the bombing of Pearl Harbor Navy base in Hawaii. He enlisted and served his country in the U.S. Navy as a pilot during World War II. Next, Mr. Glenn served in the Korean
Good.
War. He flew a total of 149 combat missions and received many awards for his faithful service to his country.
Good expression. Now let's pause. While he was in college, what was he able to do? Students watching? Emily.
Fly.
Yes, he learned how to fly. He was able to take those lessons so that he could learn how to fly, and he was able to get them for free. So even better deal there. December 7th, 1941 was the day that the Japanese attacked and bombed Pearl Harbor. As a result of that, America entered World War II. From that time, John Glenn decided that he was going to enlist and serve in the United States Navy. He served as a pilot during that war. After that war ended, America fought in another war called the Korean War, and during that time, John Glenn also participated. He served in that war as well. He served a total of how many combat missions? Students watching? Carson.
149 combat.
Exactly correct. Now, from this time, he was able to serve his country as a patriot, as a military member. He is going to continue using that love for flying in several other ways. Let's read more about them. Continue, Amaya.
In 1943, John Glenn married his childhood sweetheart, Anna Castor. She supported him and his desire to fly and encouraged him to keep doing what he loved. He loved the military, but he still loved flying. He became a test pilot and eventually set the speed record for the fastest flight across the United States. The special plane flew at 725 miles per hour. The flight took only 3 hours, 23 minutes, and 8 seconds.
Good expression. Pause. So as a test pilot, how fast was he able to fly across the United States? Students watching? Jacob.
3 hours, 23 minutes, and 8 seconds.
That's how long his flight took. And how fast was he going, Cadence?
725 miles per hour.
Yes, that was an extremely fast flight, and how far that fast and that speed of flight had come from the time of the Wright brothers. Now, an astronaut is someone who is able to travel into outer space. They're trained to do so. Outer space is being able to leave the gravitational pull of the Earth. So around the Earth has gravity that pulls things into it so that it pulls things towards it. But if you're able to travel into outer space, you go through that gravitational pull where that gravity does not affect those things. So we're going to read more about astronauts and the ability to travel into outer space. Before we do so, let's look at our important places at the bottom. Lexi, read those for us. Start with
Houston, Texas, home of NASA.
Good.
Cape
Canaveral.
Florida, place where rockets and spacecraft are launched.
Good. So now let's take a look at the map. Houston, Texas is home of NASA. Now find the state of Florida, find Cape Canaveral. That's the place where rockets are able to travel and launch from to go into outer space and other spacecraft as well. So they are launched from there and able to go into outer space. Let's read more about these astronauts. Continue reading for us, Kaden.
Astronaut. John Glenn was one of the 7 men chosen by NASA to be the first astronauts. These men trained hard. Mr. Glenn was disappointed when he was not chosen to be the first or even the second man in space. He was finally chosen for the 3rd Mercury mission. John Glenn would be the first American to orbit the Earth. On February 20, 1962, Friendship 7 launched from Cape Canaveral, Florida, and soared into the sky. Soon, Mr. Glenn was in orbit. What a sight! He orbited the Earth 3 times in about 5 hours. During this trip, he was able to see 3 sunrises and sunsets from space.
Good expression. Now let's pause. So John Glenn was one of 7 men that were chosen by NASA, and they were the very first astronauts. So what an honor to be one of those first 7. They had to train hard. They had to know what to expect. They had all kinds of details that they had to prepare for. He was able to go on the 3rd Mercury mission. So that was one of the things that he was able to do. Then the next mission that he was able to participate in was on Friendship 7. Take a look at the page, top of the page 425. You see John Glenn as he's boarding Friendship 7 there. And he's able to go and travel into outer space and go into orbit. As he does so, he's traveling around the Earth in the gravitational pull of the Earth, and he's able to circle 3 times. As he circles those 3 times, it only takes him 5 hours to do so. So how many sunsets and sunrises does he see during that time, students watching? Emily?
3.
Yes, so it's almost as if he's able to experience 3 days, but in 5 hours because he's traveling so fast around the Earth. Continue reading for us, Presley.
But Friendship 7 began to have problems. The heat shield on his spacecraft looked as if it might fail. This could cause the spacecraft to crash on fire when
Not crash, to
catch on fire when it returned
re-entered.
re-entered the Earth's atmosphere. Mission Control wasted no time to get Mr. Glenn back to Earth. Flames covered the space capsule as it sped through the air, but heat shield did not fail. The capsule landed safely on the ocean.
Safely in the ocean.
And soon back on land. During the mission, John Glenn spent only a few hours in space, but it had been a success.
Yes, work on accuracy and speed. Pause. So what happens is, as that spacecraft is going to plan to return to Earth, it has to go through that pull of gravity, and there's a lot of friction there. So what has to happen is there has to be a very well-built heat shield and protection where there are absolutely no flaws, because as it comes back down, going through that amount of friction, that would heat up the outside, and if that heat shield isn't working properly, it could cause problems where things would catch on fire, and that would cause serious problems to those trying to re-enter. There was a slight problem, but it was able to last through that problem, and he was able to safely land. And so he was able to accomplish that mission safely as well. Now here's a fun fact for us. John Glenn, as he was traveling in outer space and orbiting, he was the first person to actually eat a meal in outer space. And guess what it was? Do you have a guess, students watching? I'll take a couple guesses here. Carson?
Candy.
Candy. What do you think, Cadence?
Pizza.
Pizza. What do you think, Anna?
Peanut butter and jelly on a tortilla.
She thinks it was peanut butter and jelly. It was applesauce. So he enjoyed some applesauce during his very first meal there in outer space. Let's read a little bit more about John Glenn. Continue, Asa.
John Glenn became an American hero. Even President John F. Kennedy visited him. Many parades were held in Mr. Glenn's honor. People waited for hours to see the first man who had orbited the Earth. John Glenn hoped to return to space, but President Kennedy wanted to keep this new American hero safe. He would not travel back to space, at least not yet.
Pause, and we'll have to find out that time that he's able to do so later. Close your books. Take out your Map Skills study book, Map Skills 28, Map Skills 28. Let's take a look at this section and the directions together. Go ahead and write your name at the top, then look at the land forms. There you see A, desert, B, island, C, lake, D, oasis, E, peninsula, F, volcano, and G, waterfall. So you're going to start by labeling them. Find those locations and begin to label them according to those letters. Go ahead and complete A through G. Let's take a look at a couple of these together. The first one, letter A, you should have labeled here for the desert. Letter B, island, is here in the middle, completely surrounded by water. Letter C would be here. This would be the area that would be the lake around it. Letter D is the oasis over here, close to our desert. Letter E is our peninsula. A peninsula, is it completely surrounded by water, Emily?
No.
No, exactly correct. Over here, we have what? Students watching? Presley.
Volcano.
Volcano is right. And over here, we have what? Students watching? And Dev.
Waterfall.
A waterfall, right. Now let's look at our geographic terms and definitions. So you have hill, mountain, plain, river, valley, and volcano. A hill is what? Looking through those definitions, how would you describe it? Carson?
A raised area of land that is smaller than a mountain.
Exactly correct. What would you call a mountain, students watching? And Madison?
Raised area of Earth's surface that is larger than the hill.
You've got it. And what is a plain? Emily?
A flat or level area of land.
Perfect. What about a river? Dev?
A large stream of water, fresh water flowing over the land.
You've got it. What is a valley? Students watching? Adriana?
A lowland between hills or mountains.
A lowland between hills or mountains. And a volcano would be what? Jackson, nice and loud for us.
A mountain with openings in the earth, passed through which lava escapes.
Well done. You may close those, set them to the side. Let's take a look at one last map here. You can see a place that I want to point out to you here in Florida, Cape Canaveral. Who was able to leave from this location traveling into outer space safely on the Friendship 7? Presley?
Neil Armstrong.
Not quite. Jackson?
John Glenn.
John Glenn, right. We'll pick up more with John Glenn's story in our next lesson. Desert. Letter B, island, is here in the middle, completely surrounded by water. Letter C would be here. This would be the area that would be the lake around it. Letter D is the oasis over here, close to our desert. Letter E is our peninsula. A peninsula, is it completely surrounded by water, Emily?
No.
No, exactly correct. Over here, we have what? Students watching? Presley?
Volcano.
Volcano is right. And over here, we have what? Students watching? And Dev?
Waterfall.
A waterfall, right. Now let's look at our geographic terms and definitions. So you have hill, mountain, plain, river, valley, and volcano. A hill is what? Looking through those definitions, how would you describe it? Carson?
A raised area of land that is smaller than a mountain.
Exactly correct. What would you call a mountain, students watching? And Madison?
Raised area of Earth's surface that is larger than the hill.
You've got it. And what is a plain? Emily?
A flat or level area of land.
Perfect. What about a river? Dev?
A large stream of water, fresh water flowing over the land.
You've got it. What is a valley? Students watching? Adriana?
A lowland
A lowland between hills or mountains and a volcano would be what? Jackson, nice and loud for us.
A mountain with openings in the earth, caused through which lava escaped.
Well done. You may close those, set them to the side. Let's take a look at one last map here. You can see a place that I want to point out to you here in Florida, Cape Canaveral. Who was able to leave from this location traveling into outer space safely on the Friendship 7? Presley?
Neil Armstrong.
Not quite. Jackson?
John Glenn.
John Glenn, right. We'll pick up more with John Glenn's story in our next lesson.